watching us.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councilwoman Joanne Ryan, calling the Committee on Finance regular meeting to order. It is Tuesday, May 10, 2022. It is 5:32 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you kindly read the roll?
Chairman Joanne Ryan,
Present.
Vice Chairman Carmen Castillo, she's absent. Councilman Nicolas Narducci is absent. Councilwoman Helen DeAnthony,
Present.
Councilman James Taylor.
Here.
We have 3 present and 2 absent. We have a quorum.
Okay. Let the record reflect that Councilman Vargas, Oscar Vargas, is with us this evening. I don't see any other council people that have joined. Okay, all righty. So the first item for discussion, an overview relative to the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. We have a number of people on the agenda. Is everyone here that has been called, Madam Clerk? Think so?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, why, to make things easier, Mark Harrell is not here, but we have 2 other representatives from Northeast Revale. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. That explains who the 2 gentlemen are in the room. Okay, folks, why don't we, for efficiency's sake, just swear everyone in that will be making a presentation this evening. Madam Clerk, would you help us with that?
Can you all stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please state your full name and title for the record.
Krista Lindbergh, Deputy Finance Director and Budget Officer. I'm Sarah Silvera, Finance Director.
Daniel Lane, Operations Manager, Northeast Revaluation.
Michael Minardi, Project Manager, Northeast Revaluation.
Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer of the City of Providence.
Janice Muscatelli, City Tax Assessor.
Janice, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? It says I'm on. Can you hear
Speaker
me?
is off. Click it again.
Right down at the bottom. There you go. Thank you, Chief Taylor, for the technical assist on that.
Can you try it again, Janice?
Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
If you want to have her come in again. Where is she? They don't see her? No. We'll just wait a moment. Can you not get her?
No, this is on. I just want to double check and make sure that this is on. This is definitely on. Mr. Mancini, can you hear us?
I can, loud and clear.
We can't hear you.
Can I try it again?
Mr. Mancini, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
We cannot hear you.
Everything's on.
One more time. Can you hear us?
I can.
We cannot hear you. This
Okay.
is not good.
No, if you want to try to go out and come back in.
So the clerk is suggesting that you go back out and come back in. Could you please accommodate us and try that, folks? We apologize for the technical challenge we're having. Ooh, connecting to audio. Okay, she's muted.
You're muted right now, Janice. Can you hear us?
Can you
now?
hear me?
We can't hear
We
you.
can't hear you.
I think it's the speaker.
Can you hear me?
She texted, she said she's not muted.
No, she's not muted. Everything's on here. Let's check.
Test speaker and microphone. Do we want to try that?
So speaker.
That's the O.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Which is working because when you speak, it moves, so. It's a glitch on it.
Larry, we can see you, and I'm assuming you can hear us. Can you say something out loud, please, to test your audio?
He's still connecting.
Oh. Okay, so there's a mute
You're on
symbol.
mute, Larry.
Madam Chair, can you hear me now?
Saying,
No, sir, we cannot.
See his phone's coming through here.
Can you hear me now?
I don't have anything muted, so I don't know.
do you want to, Madam Clerk, do you want to shut down and come back on?
I think if I end the meeting, I'm not gonna be able to get back in.
They could probably call in on their phones.
I think it's-
Madam Clerk, how do you think we can solve this?
Can you call in on your phones and just keep your
Audio,
audio on?
your visual on, or whatever, video.
Let me try something.
To Dino to see if he has any tips in getting the owl speaker to like broadcast, because I think he uses one in his office. Oh, okay. So he might know how to work that thing.
Didn't say the recurring process, didn't mention that the system though.
Let's just give the clerk a moment.
Hey, Angela, Demo has one of.
Madam
those
Clerk,
Zooms
can you
in
hear me
his
now?
office. Would it be helpful if you called at this point, or?
What, the owl?
The
The owl's working
the-
here.
oh,
It's the
okay.
connection here.
Where
For
would the
the
speaker, but is that the speaker?
That is the speaker.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think the speaker is not,
Is
People get
Demo upstairs?
talking,
he said he couldn't, he said if I call him, he can try and walk us through it.
Because it is working because it's going to you. Hey, we have no sound. Yep. Yeah, because when everyone's speaking in here, it's moving to their voices, but I can't hear Larry or Denise.
Seems a bit louder, isn't it?
Dude, didn't it? Janice is on mute. Janice, you're on mute. Can you unmute and can you talk, can you just say something now for us?
They're not muted. Well, Denise,
They both.
Denise, can you try it again?
Yeah.
Yes.
There, now.
Madam Clerk, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Gina, what did you do?
That was yours.
It was the owl.
It was the owl.
It was the, it was the
That's
volume
why
button on
there's a
the
plus and minus on the owl. Way down.
Okay, everybody, let's all settle down. We're in good shape. And first of all, I'd like to thank the clerk. I understand that was a little bit challenging there, but we figured it out. And I think that we're elevating the chief, the majority leader, to technical assistance.
No,
Chief,
no
anyway.
decline.
So I think we're all good. Just to be sure, everybody, Chief Mancini and Tax Assessor Janice, I'm sorry, you can hear us, right? And we can hear you, okay. All right, now we could also hear the people in the hallway. Okay, what I'd like to do at this point is, I'd like to ask for a motion, please, to take items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, waive the readings of those items, and take all matters together, just to expedite our discussion this evening. Motion made by Chief Taylor, seconded by Councilwoman Anthony. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Okay, so let us begin our discussion on the overview of the budget fiscal year 2022, 2023. Who will lead us in that discussion?
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening. On behalf of the Finance Department and the Administration, Director Sarah Silveria and Deputy Director and Budget Officer Crystal Lindberg will make the presentation as provided earlier to the clerk today. And with that,
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may, I defer to those.
That is this document that has been provided by the clerk to the committee. Okay, we're going, and that's what you're going to present. So let's call this Exhibit 1. I need a motion to enter this as Exhibit 1. It's a multi-page PowerPoint presentation entitled Fiscal Year 2023 Proposed Budget. Motion made by Chief Taylor, seconded by Councilwoman Anthony. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we have the item that you're presenting in the record, so please.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you want to put it up on the screen? Anybody? Or why don't we just continue on? Oh, there it is. Yes. That's good. Let's put that up. Would that be doable?
Will be, it's gonna allow me.
Oh, boy. You know what? We're good. Let's start. Let's start, folks.
Okay, Madam Chair, if you turn to the first page of this overview, the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget is a balanced budget that stays within the 4% cap and includes a $100,000 rainy day payment. The total budget is $567.4 million. It's a 5% growth over the fiscal year 22 budget. Healthcare costs have increased by $1.1 million overall, and that's due just to increased utilization. The pension actuarially determined contribution has increased by $4.3 million in the general fund. It's a 5.6% increase, and it is the 11th straight year of the full ADC payment. Moving on to revenue. Tax revenue, there's a $14.3 million increase in real estate tax, representing 5% increase. There's a $170,000 decrease in tangible tax, which represents 0.3%. There's a $2.8 million decrease in motor vehicle tax, and this is due to the motor vehicle phase out. There is additional motor vehicle reimbursement from the state offsetting this decrease. And the motor vehicle tax will be fully phased out by fiscal 2024 according to the current schedule. We have increased the collection rate to 94%. I don't know if you remember, but in fiscal 23 we had reduced that to 93.75. We had been in the middle of a homestead recertification, so we wanted to have some extra room in the collection rate to leave room for people to continue to apply and get that homestead exemption. Moving on to the next page, the residential tax rate is $18.50 per thousand with a homestead exemption of 45%. This is a tax rate decrease of $6.06 per thousand, or 24.67%. And the homestead exemption represents a 5% increase over the fiscal 22 budget. The commercial tax rate is proposed at 33.85 cents per thousand, and that is a decrease of $2.85 per thousand, or 7.77%. The tangible rate is proposed at 55.55 per thousand. It is a decrease of 25 cents per thousand, and there's no tangible tax for small businesses with property assessments under $10,000, consistent with prior year. State and federal revenues, we have budgeted $34 million in pilots, $6.2 million in distressed cities, and the state aid represents what was proposed in the governor's 2023 budget proposal. We have budgeted $1.5 million in federal aid and anticipated rebates from FEMA related to COVID, and there's a $25.5 million revenue line for ARPA fund, which represents $16.5 million in lost or reduced revenues and $8.7 million in urgent capital expenditures. Moving on to pilots, they are level funded at the fiscal 22 amount. There are a handful of agreements that expire on June 30th, 2022. They represent the agreements that we entered into in 2012. Those agreements represent about $3.2 million if we were not able to negotiate with the universities to at least level fund us as we renegotiate those agreements.
Could you please repeat that?
Yes, so the pilot agreements with the university, there's two sets of agreements. One was entered into in 2003. It was a 20-year agreement, and those expire at the end of fiscal year 2023. There's also a set of 2012 agreements that expire this June 30th, 2022. We're just beginning to enter into those negotiations with pilots, so we have level funded with the expectation that the organizations will at least level fund us for fiscal 23 while we renegotiate and come to an agreement. But that would be a $3.2 million exposure if we weren't able to do that. As far as departmental fees, we've budgeted those at pre-pandemic levels. And then moving on to expenditures, personnel, there are 1,270 FTEs exclusive of police and fire. This is an increase of 9 positions. Police and fire, 831 FTEs, and that is a decrease of 44. And that is net of a police academy of 50 recruits and attrition in those departments. And total salaries for Class A members is $52,745,844. That's an increase of $2.3 million. And the salaries for police and fire, $64,685,339, and it's an increase of $126,000. This budget includes Local 1033 proposed contract 2.5% wage increase, fire contractual raise of 4%, and Fraternal Order of Police 3.75 contractual wage increase. And we have extended the 2.5 laborers 1033 to non-union staff as well. On expenditure programmatic highlights, there's really nothing new programmatically in this budget. It's funding existing programs, but I can quickly go through this with you. Under healthy and thriving communities, we have $330,000 for outreach support for our most vulnerable neighbors, $720,000 in behavioral health crisis response program, $200,000 for the Amos House A Hands Up program, $275,000 for PVD Fest and downtown arts programming, $1.5 million for the 71st Police Academy, $300,000 for recruitment on the 53rd Firefighter Training Academy, and a $100.3 million payment to the pension fund representing 100% of the ABC. We have level funded schools at $130 million. There's $425,000 for early learning and development, $1 million for youth employment and internships, $580,000 for summer learning, $400,000 for Providence Talks, and $350,000 for after-school supports through PASA.
Yes. Madam Auditor, you have a question?
On the, what page?
for the education for every student in that list, can you identify the funding source for each of those, if you don't mind?
Oh, sure. So the $1 million youth employment and internships, that's through the OEO department. The $580,000 for summer learning is in contingencies and non-departmental. $400,000 for Providence Talks and the PASA are both in the grants line item, and the $425,000 for early learning, that's also in contingencies as well.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, they are all part of the non-general fund, general fund. So I just wanted to, it's scattered throughout.
Yeah. I actually have the same question on the prior slide when you talk about programmatic highlights, healthy and thriving communities. Where's all that coming from?
So the $200,000 for Amos has a hand up, that is also coming from the grants line item. The PVD Fest and Downtown Arts Programming, that's coming from the ACT budget. The Behavioral Health and Crisis Response Team, that is Healthy Communities?
Yep, correct.
And the $330,000 for outreach for vulnerable neighbors. Do you know which account that is?
I believe that is in Healthy Communities as well, but we can confirm that.
Thank you. Okay. Chief, did you say you had a question?
Yeah, I got a couple questions actually.
Chief
Back-
Taylor, please.
Back with the homestead, are the people gonna have to do like they did 3 years ago and prove that they have the homestead?
Not this year.
Not this year, okay. And 2 other questions, if you don't mind. The pilots, it says here 4.7 million budget shortfall, but you said I thought 3.3.
It is 3.3, there might be a typo in there. There's
Oh.
some other,
Okay. And also, do you know which ones are expiring this year?
so it's 2012 agreements, and they're with the 4 education colleges, so it's RISD, Brown, Johnson and Wales, and PC.
Those expire this year.
Yeah,
And the
there's
rest?
actually 2 agreements with each of those institutions. So the 2012 agreements will expire at the end of this year.
Are you good?
I'm good, yes, thank you.
So staying on that topic, so you've obviously level funded this budget, assuming that you're gonna come to agreement with these
Correct.
institutions. So what are you going to do to fill the gap, should you not reap the dollars that you're anticipating?
Right, so if we are not able to come to an agreement, we would have to look at our expenses and cut expenses, perhaps look at our hiring and slow down on hiring, but we would definitely have to make some adjustments to how we're spending if those institutions weren't willing to.
How are you going to square that away with the council having to pass this budget? The deadline is June 30th. If we pass a budget before June 30th and you're not able to identify these funds or come to agreement with these universities.
I think it's important to show the universities and our residents that we do depend on this money to have a balanced budget. It's really important that they come to the table and negotiate and work with us. We're really not able to support the budget without making cuts without this funding. You're right, like if they are not.
Please continue.
If they're not able to do that for us, then we will have to make some cuts. And, you know, there are other times that revenues don't come in the way that we think they are, and so we have to look at how we're spending mid-year, and so we'll make cuts and recommendations on how we're going to end the year with a balanced budget.
Thank you. Chief Mancini, you wanted to weigh in on that?
I do, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and to Director Silveria's point, this disclosure, Madam Chair, was made intentionally to make the council aware of the situation associated with the expiring agreements. I will say a couple of things. First and foremost, from a cash flow perspective, we generally receive these payments in 2 biannual installments, generally by December 3rd, and then again by June 30th. So from a cash flow standpoint, we won't be immediately challenged, but I do know that the conversation is more centered around a balanced budget. I do want to say that the work that we did in finance and administration and putting together a most recent report associated with nonprofits. We do hope and expect that would lead to some wider conversation. Ms. Silveria is correct in noting that we have reached out to the universities and hospitals. We would hope that dialogue will continue. I suspect and surmise that perhaps they would rather wait until there is new administration, both mayoral and council, if you will. That's just my impression. But I do know this much. The next new agreements, Madam Chair, will probably more than likely be sustaining long-term into the future. What we would minimally ask these organizations is at least under goodwill to at least continue the next payment for the next budget, so that budget would be balanced while we work through what that new agreement might look like. So we are clear in our regard, and we will continue that pursuit. But also for the time being, we felt it was imperative to put that revenue at level funded for both budgetary purposes and also for our own best interest in positioning for negotiations.
Okay, Chief, do you have a question?
How does the General Assembly affect what they're doing up there? About putting in for them to pay taxes?
Yeah, so,
where does that play into?
So, Councilman, as you know, I gave recent testimony both before this committee, and it was testimony consistent with testimony I provided to the State Senate Special Commission on Tax Exempt and Nonprofits. I would imagine that commission will prepare its own report. I further believe that they will cite the impact of the revenue that we do not receive as a result of the nonprofit and the state pilot formula. They will focus in on the state pilot formula more than the local pilot agreements. Perhaps in the end, maybe some legislative relief will be provided where maybe they'll be excused from the local pilot payment in turn for a larger and wider and more dependable and more sustainable state pilot payment. I would hope that would at minimum be the case, but as of now, we don't know the outcome and we're not aware of what the results of that panel and what report they might issue.
And last question, since there's going to be more money in the state this year, is there any talk of them boosting up the pilot? Because every time when they do the pilots, it's always shorthanded because they say they don't have enough money. But this year, with the abundance of $660 million, will they increase that or at least level fund it? Or how does that work?
I only know that as proposed by the governor's proposed budget that was submitted in February, it was level funded for the FY22 budget year at $34 million. Again, as I had testified a month ago before this committee, I informed the committee that in actuality, and we have our assessor with us this evening, if we were to get the actual reimbursement formula at the maximum 27%, we might be looking at a formula that would yield a payment closer to $36 million rather than $34 million. But what happens very often is the General Assembly appropriates a certain fixed dollar amount of appropriation for pilot reimbursement for all pilot communities throughout Rhode Island. And so in some cases, when those reimbursements exceed that appropriation, then there's a pro rata reduction across the board to all communities. We're seeing that now currently in Providence. So with due respect, I would hope that the General Assembly could revisit that. But as of now, we're basing it upon the governor's proposed and submitted budget to the General Assembly, which, as you know, they're still vetting that budget, and they probably won't vote on that budget till sometime in the month of June.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on this topic? Councilman Vargas?
When they going to be renegotiating these agreements with the universities?
When are we going to begin them? We have reached out to them, so they're just in the very beginning stages.
They haven't answered yet?
No.
How many universities do we have though?
In the agreements, we have 4. There's Brown University, PC, RISD, and Johnson & Wales.
And how many hospitals?
We have Lifespan and, is it just Lifespan?
Care New England.
And Care New England. That's right.
There's not any other way to reach them and get this rolling and see how far we're in and to make a decision?
So I think part of the complications with that is the universities know that there's a new administration. So do they want to work with this administration, or do they want to wait till the new administration is sworn in January? So that is the struggle right now.
But we need to make a decision with this administration. That would be the issue.
Thank you.
I got one more question.
Sure.
Can I have a chairperson?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry about that. On the 18.50 proposal that the administration has for the residential property owners, is any more room to play with these numbers?
So we have to do a balance on the city's expenses and our revenues, and this was the rate that we came to, that we stayed within the 4% cap, and that we were able to support city services and end at a balanced budget.
So I think we're going to have a presentation from the folks that did the reval, so that's a discussion that we can
With them?
have tonight.
Okay.
Okay, so let's
Sorry
just
about
hold that
that.
thought. No, don't be sorry. Those are good thoughts. I have my own thought on the pilot, and I think it behooves this administration to engage the meds and eds into a discussion on the agreement. I don't think it's fair for us to say, let's wait till a new administration comes in. To me, that's kicking the can down the road, and I would encourage those discussions, and if you haven't begun them, I think they need to begin in earnest, and if not, the council, I would believe, would be more than willing to step up, particularly the finance committee, if necessary, to get everybody in and have those conversations in earnest. It's wholly unacceptable not to do that. So we're going to keep our eye on that, and yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I want to be clear
Chief
about
Mancini.
that. Madam Chair,
Yes,
I want to be clear about that the administration has, as early as possible, initiated the request to negotiate, and I believe any comments that myself or Mr. Surveyor made was opinion that perhaps we believe that if the negotiations are moving slower or they're not existent at this time, it's because maybe they believe that they might be able to negotiate a better arrangement in a new administration. I don't mean to impugn the integrity or the ability of this administration or this council. These public officials, myself and the finance team, have diligently worked to make that happen, and we continue to do that, and we will continue to keep this council posted on that. It's that we had to take a budgetary measure that's available to us, and that was set it at the level amount of the year prior, and we'll work towards, as a placeholder, we'll work towards achieving that revenue through those negotiations at a minimum. I pledge to you, and my team pledges to you, that we are doing that.
I understand the budgetary decision that was made. I get that. Madam Auditor, you had a question?
Yes, Larry, Sarah, or Crystal. I mean, I understand that I understand the situation, but I think the council should not pass this budget knowing that we don't have an agreement in place. It's not a balanced budget. So I don't know if there is an article we could add in the budget to say, if we don't have this agreement by whatever time frame you think, then these are the cuts that are going to be made to equal to the 3.3 million. It has to be identified, or there's no way they can pass the budget without an agreement in place.
Because it's not a balanced budget.
It's not balanced.
Okay, I think enough said. I think the administration has heard the council on that. If we need to take further action, we're more than willing to do that. But I think the auditor's point is appropriate. It is not a balanced budget if this is a dangling matter. Okay, so I think we talked that through pretty well. Any other questions on the presentation? And this is, again, is just an initial broad presentation of the budget, an overview. We're going to have the opportunity to delve into these items a little deeper. So tonight is just, again, to give us a broad perspective of the components of the budget. So any other questions for the finance team tonight on the overview that was presented to us? No? I had one, so we've got the 1033 contracts just came into the council. We had been anxiously awaiting it. So that has been calculated in to this budget? You've got
Yes.
wage increases of 2.75, is that
That
correct?
is correct. 2.5.
2.5, yeah.
2.5?
2.5.
Sorry.
2.5% year one, 2.75, and then 3%.
Okay, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. I appreciate that. Okay, so, and the other wage increases that are already, that are in this budget, the FOP, could you just speak to those quickly, please? Just talk about the contractual wage increases for the record.
Sure, the FOP contractual wage increase is 3.75% and has been included in this budget.
Yep.
The local 799 fire contractual wage increase is 4%, and that is also included in this budget.
Thank you. Okay, what about any potential liability for the Crowley Act litigation? Do we have an update that you can provide the committee on that? What will that mean? Where are we at?
So the city is currently in a litigation with this, so I can't really speak to that on public record.
Okay. Can you provide an update to the auditor on that, the status of that? We would like to understand that as we move forward with this budget review. Okay. Can you give us a timeline? No, nothing, okay. All right. Do we have a solicitor with us? Who is the solicitor with us this evening? Madam Clerk, who is the solicitor? Ken?
Is that his name?
Kenny Cheverini, are you with us?
No, he's not.
Solicitor Cheverini?
Madam Chair, I'm here.
Wonderful. I'm so happy that you're with us this evening.
Oh, thank you.
Solicitor Cheverini, so I'm sure you heard the question that was posed by the chair and the response that was provided by the administration. Can you provide any further color on the question posed?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Sure. We're all aware that there's litigation out there. I asked about the city's liability, potential liability relative to any decision on the Crowley Act.
Okay. And as far as the Crowley Act, I don't know. Typically what we do is, and Larry can tell you, we do an estimate of potential exposure that we provide to the council as well as to finance, which in the event that there is an unfavorable decision, though the impact is and the liabilities are factored in.
Okay, and that's fair. All I'm asking for, the auditor does not have that potential exposure.
We will make her,
amount.
we'll get her the
Perfect.
most current version in the tomorrow.
Perfect. We just want to make sure that we don't leave that out of consideration for this budget. Thank you very much. Chief Mancini, is that doable?
Madam Chair, if I may, with due respect to the solicitor, I want to be clear that exercise in providing potential outstanding claim liability, generally associated with claims, is generally done in conjunction with year-end closeout and year-end audit for purposes of the preparation of the financial statements. However, currently, while this matter is being highly litigated, I believe that the information that's being shared and exposure that would be that we will be subjected to is still in doubt, and I believe that's what Ms. Silveria was attesting to. I'd be happy to discuss it with the Solicitor Cheverini as well tomorrow, and Ms. Silveria, and arrive at some accommodation that we could share with the internal auditor as to the current proceedings, the current standing, and what the potential for settlement or potential for claim would be.
Okay, that'll work. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
What about decrease in grants? I noticed.
So there's a $110,000 decrease in grants, and that is, there was a $110,000 allocation for sustainability for grants. but there was no identified recipient there. So that 110,000 has been moved to the departmental budget instead of grants, given that they will have to file the proper channels of voting.
Okay. All right, how about, there's one big, Parks Department, Roger Williams, there's a 62% increase, year over year. What is that? Madam Auditor?
Sarah, Krista, when you look in their budget, it's all benefits. It's a really distorted number in benefits, in the increase. Their salaries didn't go up significantly, but benefits went up significantly.
So it could just be an allocation error, so we'll reallocate those benefits for the final budget.
Yeah.
Okay, just looked really out of whack. Okay, and then I noticed 101% year over year on Board of Canvassers expenditure.
Yes, so we are at, our 2023 will be an election year, so they'll be paying election officials, and they'll have some additional expenses in their departmental budget for that as well.
So that's the primary and the general, so it's 2 elections?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
that makes sense, okay. How about heat, power, and light, 28%?
That is based on information that's provided to us from the Sustainability Office and Public Property.
It's an increase, that's a big increase. Okay, we're gonna look into that a little bit more. Anybody else have any questions? I just took a quick glance that I had. How about Human Services Department, Human Relations Commission, 18% increase year over year? Not a lot of money, but what's that about?
Again, that's going to be, there's a $10,000 increase in benefits there and a $12,000 increase in salaries. And I think we may not have assigned attrition because that position is filled, and in prior years it hasn't been filled, so we had assigned a higher attrition level in that department.
Okay. Does that commission give out any grants?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
No awards or anything like that? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Any questions? Did I see any hands? Yes, Councilman Vargas.
Do we have any hiring freeze that you not want to hire no more people?
No, not currently.
You don't have any?
We do not have a hiring freeze, no.
No? So that's still up. So you guys are not going to freeze the hiring?
There's not a plan for that right now, no.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're all set? Madam Auditor, do you have any questions?
Did you go into the collections? Fiscal year 22 collections. Can you identify how much has been collected for TSAs? I know it's all wrapped up into tax collections.
Yes, so we have collected $12.9 million on a $13.8 million budget in real estate TSAs, and we've collected $935,000 of a $935,000 budget for tangible this year so far, as of April 30th.
Are you expecting to collect more, or have we collected 100% and we've lost some TSAs?
There was a consent decree in the middle of the year, so we may have lost some of that this year, but I'll have to double back with our collector and see.
A consent decree?
One of the TSAs went back off TSA, so they are now in the tax roll.
As
an
regular?
As an 8 law.
Okay. So we have active TSAs that became 8 laws?
Yes.
How many of them?
I don't have that level of detail, but I'm happy to work with you and the assessor.
Janice? Oh.
Yes.
We have active TSAs that became 8 law, so.
Correct.
Okay, so that makes sense. When I look at the 8 law code, I see that there's 4 active TSAs and some expired TSAs that became 8 law, and that came through a consent decree?
That's correct. It was a
And-
consent order that was signed with the solicitor.
Okay, so the solicitor approved it, and it has not come through any tax certificates for city council to approve or deny? Does council
has
still have
not.
the authority? Does the council still have the authority to deny those tax certificates?
I would have to defer to the solicitor. They will come
Okay.
through the finance committee probably on the next quarterly statements for abatement reports.
And do you know the total value
I don't
of
have that
this year?
information. I don't have that information, but I'm happy to get it for you.
Okay, thank you.
The solicitor doesn't have the ability to abate taxes, it's the council's purview, correct? Correct?
Well, it's by a consent
That's my
judgment, a
understanding.
consent decree, or a consent agreement. So the city solicitor arbitrarily, unilaterally abated these taxes, made these former TSAs and current TSAs 8 law.
Okay, so we're gonna ask for a summary of those 8 law TSAs. We wanna look at it, we wanna look at the consent agreement. All right?
Ken, can I ask Ken one more
Yep,
question?
please do.
Ken?
Yes.
Mr. Solicitor? So these
Yes.
properties that were or are still tax stabilizations, shouldn't they be revoked before they get converted to an 8 law?
Let me, Gina, I have not seen them, and I need to at least look at them before I can provide any opinion. So,
Okay.
Let's just
I mean, I'd like the opportunity to review them before I provide any opinion.
That
Okay.
sounds like a great idea.
All right,
That's what
thank
we're gonna
you.
do. Please work with the solicitor, the auditor on that, please, and she will
Absolutely.
brief us. And if we need to get more information, we'll bring it up at the next finance meeting. Okay, good. Are you good on that topic?
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else on any other topic? All right, I think I'm good for now on this. We're gonna get the 3-box reports, Larry, Chief Mancini, please. We're gonna get those on, when we have a department
Yes.
come before us, okay?
Yes.
And I know,
And finance team has already committed to the order that I believe by weekend, by Friday, she'll have the 3-box reports for all of the departments.
okay, with organizational charts, we're gonna get those?
Yes.
Okay, and you're gonna show the 2 equal branches of government, the administration and the council, and the reporting structures accordingly?
I defer to.
That would make sense though, right? That would be the organizational chart, standard organizational chart. We'll look forward to receiving those. Okay, and so the budget books, I know that my committee, right, our committee has received their budget books because we're culling through them this evening. And the rest, the remaining budget books that haven't been picked up, Councilman Vargas has his, will be handed out at the council meeting tomorrow night. So, not tomorrow night, Thursday night, right?
Tomorrow.
we have.
Tomorrow, excuse me. Oh, I'm a day late. Okay, so I think that addressed, Chief Taylor?
Well, he said the other ones would be available Friday night, but I was seeing that we're having people come in Thursday night, so we're not gonna have anything for them.
Are we gonna have the org chart for, the department is coming
Well,
before us?
the 3 boxes and all that.
Yes, we'll have that. We'll have,
For
the
that,
committee
for
will
that.
have it. I'm talking about the budget books. The actual budget books will be
Okay.
going to the council folks. All right, so that's that. I want to thank you very much for your presentations. I look forward to the budget season. It's always exciting to have everybody come before us and talk about what's happening in their departments. And the council looks forward to vetting this budget. We will certainly go through it from top to bottom and make sure that the city expenditures are appropriate and that we take our job of spending taxpayers' money very seriously. Okay, with that, I think that we're good with the budget presentation. Now I would like to switch over on to the folks that are with us tonight from, what is it, Northeast Revaluation Group. We have Michael Minardi and Dan Lane. I'd like to invite you to join us at the table. You've already been sworn in. But we have a number of questions for you about the process that you utilize to come up with the levy, the tax rates, and I know that Councilman Vargas had a question.
Madam Chair. I have a question I'd like to pose to the assessor and chief.
Oh, I'm sorry, I asked if anybody had any questions.
No,
Councilman Taylor?
On the reval. I just want to know, before we hear the presentation from Northeast Reval, I just wanted to know why it was that we switched valuation companies. And I thought that would be a question for the tax assessor or the chief.
Okay, I think that's fair. What's the response on that? Thank you, Councilwoman.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, as you know, a reval process by state law is conducted once every 3 years. Every 9 years, it's a full list of measures, and the intervening 2 revals are known as statistical revals, which are based on sales, comparable sales. This particular reval is a statistical reval. The assessor's office, more than a year or so ago, in keeping with best practices, went out to bid, as has been encouraged by council as well on any contract that we do, to put the contract out to bid. And in that effort, Northeast Reval Group was the winning bid, not just on price, but on overall work and work performance. And while we had a different reval company the last 2 revals, we did put it out to RFP. I think the assessor might be able to provide more information, but Northeast was selected as the reval company. It was submitted to the city's Board of Contract and Supply, and they have been on board conducting the reval work for more than a year now, and will continue through the process, including right through the time that we certify the levy and any appeal process that ensues thereafter. But if I've left something out, Madam Assessor, if you would be so kind to provide any more details on that.
I think you identified the reasons we went out to bid. They were the lowest bidder. We did choose to go with the new company. We also upgraded our software system in the process. So it was a decision made within the office to switch from Vision to Northeast.
And may I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
And when was the last time we went out to bid for these services?
3 years ago.
We go out to...
Well, almost 4 years ago.
Okay.
Right.
And may I just ask one final question? Is there any thought or is there any difference in methodologies used by these 2 reval companies that affect the decision as to who to go with?
No, they use the same methodology.
I would say no.
They use the same methodology?
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much for that discussion. So we have an exhibit before us that was provided to us by Northeast Evaluation Group. Before we begin, I would like to entertain a motion. It is a 26-page document. It is there's a cover letter to the Finance Committee. It's dated May 5, 2022. To the committee members, they're saying attached are the preliminary figures for December 31, 2021 reval of all taxable real estate in the city of Providence. We have broken the 3 categories, single family, multifamily, and condominiums down into their respective wards. Northeast revaluation is in the informal hearing phase of this statistical revaluation, and the company reserves the right to update the attached information as there may be changes made to individual properties in the city. Okay, Let's, may I have a motion to make this Exhibit 2, please?
So moved.
Motion made by Majority Leader Taylor, seconded by Councilwoman Anthony. All in favor, aye. Any opposed, ayes have it, motion carries. Exhibit 2 is entered into the record. So, gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for listening to our budget presentation. I hope you found it riveting, as well as our little technical challenges that you jumped up and offered to assist, so I appreciate that. So what I'd like you to do tonight, Councilwoman Anthony had some questions about the RFP. I'm not necessarily concerned about that, but I am very much interested in your explanation of the statistical revaluation, what that means. That's obviously what we're doing this year, how you went about it, and then, you know, your presentation regarding how that reval has impacted the city as a whole. You've broken down the information ward by ward, which we appreciate. We want to hear that. And also, I'd like testimony too as to how different properties were impacted. So first, talk about the statistical reval, what that means, how you go about it, what are the components of it?
So the state of Rhode Island does a statistical every 3 years, a full every 9 years. This was obviously statistical. We went out to, city went out to bid, we bid on it. We've worked with both assessors, Elise and Janice, in the past in different communities. We work in about half of the communities in the state here. We use Patriot CAMA. Patriot is in the city of Boston. It's in 130 of the communities in Massachusetts. It's in the city of Hartford. It's used nationwide. So to start out as statistical, what we do is we take the sales for the previous year.
I'm sorry, you said Patriot?
Patriot is the CAMA, the software that we actually use.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
That's okay.
They refer to it as CAMA, Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal.
Okay.
A statistical, we take the sales for the previous year, which would be 2021. We divide all those sales up by style, meaning Cape, Colonial, Ranch, Bungalow, multifamily, 2-family, 3-family, 4-family. Same thing with commercial. And then we take that same group of sales and divide it up by neighborhoods, which the city is divided up into geographic neighborhoods. Develop a square foot price for the land and the building, and then apply those to all the homes in town. Then every property has its own characteristics, meaning age, grade, condition, number of bathrooms, number of kitchens, flooring, air conditioning, and that comes up with the overall value for each property. We then did a field review, driving up and down every street in town, reviewing the parcels with the property record card. You know, is it a Cape, is it a Colonial, is it 2-story, is it, you know, is it average condition, is it fair condition, is it, you know, a C-grade home? And we do that throughout the town.
So you reviewed every single
so we
property value or real estate value? Okay.
So that's called a field review. We do that in the car. We finalize the values once that process is done. We turn it over to, in this case, we turn the values over to Janice. She runs through it with the 3 appraisers on staff, trying to find any issues. We did a conversion this year to Patriot, so there may have been, it's not apple for apple from Vision CAMA to Patriot CAMA as far as, you know, what they call this or what we call this. So we try to, you know, matching every little detail up. Once Janice was happy with the values, we sent out notices. We're now finishing up the informal hearing process this week, where the taxpayers can come in and present any information that we may have incorrect. You know, do they have 2 bedrooms? Do they have 3 bathrooms versus 4 bathrooms? Is their house maybe not a Cape, it's a Colonial? Any type of information that they can provide us. We'll correct that information within the next few weeks. We'll be sending out anyone that has had a hearing, a new notice. within probably the next 3 weeks. And then it's just, it's up to Janice, you know, to certify the role at that point. Obviously, we are here to help assist with any type of appeals going forward. The contract is, you know, I believe it's for the next 3 years to help with any appeals that the city does get. Obviously, Patriot Camera software is right in Massachusetts, so we provide support in our office. They provide support as well nationwide as well. So it's we're a local company right here in Warwick, Rhode Island.
Okay.
These are recommendations to the assessor's office. Then it's up to the assessor's office for her and her staff to accept these recommendations. They're based on analysis of sales, but it's still up to the assessor's office to make the final determination on whether she approves of what we did or not.
Okay. Councilman Anthony.
Just, so did you say that you pretty much just look at the sales for 2021, just the sales for that year?
That is correct. So we use 1 year of sales. And other parts of the project where we did the building permits for this year as well.
And is that required by law, just so I know, on statistical revals? Is that required by law that you only use sales for 2021?
So it's up to each community. Generally, the communities use 1 year of sales. Some communities may broaden it to 2 years of sales, but typically it's 1 year of sales in most communities.
So I just would like to know from our tax assessor whether that's been our practice for a while now, to use just the 1 year before, or what is our process? What has our process been?
The last two revaluations, we did use 1 year of sales.
Thank you.
You all set?
Yep.
Councilman Vargas.
I think you guys pick up the wrong year to do evaluation, because was a hot market. And if you went based on sales, we don't have no product. If you go out there, we don't have no house for sale because everybody wasn't enclosed. It wasn't working. And the construction company was trying to go back into the fields to start working, but they didn't have no people because they were in recession. They were afraid to come out because of COVID. Most of the people, they were in closed house, waiting for the check that the government was sending them. They didn't want to work. Plus, people was running away from the cities because they were afraid of COVID, so they were willing to pay high prices for the house. So the market was very high. If you go based on that, it's wrong because now interests are going up, houses are coming down, and the property owners is going to get stuck with a high value and high taxes. And then if they want to sell, like at the end of the year they want to sell it, they won't be able to sell it because property is low market and high property taxes. We have to see if we can work it out, we can find a solution to lower the value and work out with the numbers of the administration proposal to have a balance on the budget. But like going with this number is outrageous because you're getting up $89,000 for one family house. You cannot report that nothing to the IRS. When you do your taxes, only taxes you're going to report. You cannot even report not even a nail that you buy 2 feet of the door. It's a one family house, it's a luxury. If you don't have a good job, a paying good job that we don't have in the city of Providence, these taxpayers won't be able to survive because of these type of evaluation, this winner wages. They don't have no income. Some people are in fixed income, especially in my neighborhood. I have a lot of people with fixed income. How are we going to survive? That's why we have to figure out how we can manage the value and the proposal of the tax bracket. We have to meet somewhere to make this thing working. But like 2021, Councilwoman Helen, she's right. Why wouldn't pick up 2020 or 2019 or 2020 was the worst year too, everything was shut down. You know? So we have to see if we can find a solution, not only one family house, 2 and 3 families.
So, may I
Go ahead.
respond?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, while it's not part of my presentation, I did have an inclination that that would come up tonight. So I did a review of sales activity for the past 25 years from the local multiple listing service. And so for the past 25 years, the average number of single-family sales in the city was 769. Last year, there were 897 sales. So there was a story that came out in the Providence Business News yesterday, which I think led me to that inclination that it might come up tonight, that there was insufficient information to do revaluations in certain communities. So we had an abundance of sales. And as far as 2020 goes, so the average is 769 over the past 25 years. In 2020, there were 856. Once again, an abundance of sales. Now, those sales in 2020 would have been lower just because the market is increasing. We can't pick, the state sets the schedule for when you do a revaluation. You know, it's 2021 this year, 3 years from now you'll do another one, unless the state changes the schedule or extends or shortens the period in between revaluations. Same is true for the east side. The average number of sales over the past 25 years for single-family properties is about 202. Last year, there were 238. Once again, despite COVID, people are still buying and selling homes. They're seeing it as good investments that have been generally increasing in value, as you can see through the charts. 2020, there were 215. I mean, I started to write it down by hand, and I really couldn't read my own handwriting, so I typed it up a little bit so I could address it. We don't pick the schedule, you don't pick the schedule. I know other communities have requested to delay their revals, and they're assuming their values will drop by the end of the year. I don't know.
Like the city of Warwick, they scheduled to stop and they do the review next year.
Right, Warwick, East Providence, Johnston, I think New Shoreham did it too. That's, you know, that's not up to us. We just do the service that we've been hired to do. And the schedule is the schedule. Once again, are the values going to go down in 2022? We have not seen that so far. It might happen by the end of the year. You would think logically the rates are going up, that the values would go down, but that's, we do retrospective looks of value. We look backwards. We don't do prospective. We don't look forward. We give you the value of the properties as of December 31st in the reval year, which was 2021. If we had used 2020 sales, it would have artificially brought the values down as of December 31st, because we would have used lower value homes. It could have sold for 300 in 2020 and then 375 in 2021, the same property.
So what I'd like to do, I think that would be helpful at this, you have a presentation. I'd like you to walk through the presentation for us. I'd like to see the impact across the city, ward by ward, and the impact on different property types, if you will. Could you make that presentation for us?
Sure. So the map on page 2 are the single-family properties and the changes in values throughout the entire city. The lowest percentage increase in value is on the east side of Providence. That is true because it was the highest starting point in value. So despite the fact that it had the lowest percentage increase, it had a high starting point and it had the highest dollar increase in value. And when you look at wards 10, 11, and 15, with the highest percentage increases in value, they had the lowest starting points. They started in the $162,000 range. That's the data that's on page 3. So as happens in most revaluations, your lower value properties go up quicker and more than your higher value properties. It's just a typical.
Okay, so
That's the
the,
question where we go, or do you want to wait till the end?
no, you can ask a question, but let me just jump in here. So the average, the average increase for single-family homes across the state is 46%.
Not across the state, in the city.
Across the city.
46%.
I'm sorry, obviously it's the city, I misspoke. I gave myself a raise. Okay, so it's 46% across the city. And your testimony is the east side 1, 2, and 3, which are clearly the lowest increases.
On a percentage basis.
On a percentage basis, not a value.
Right.
Versus some of the lower value properties have the highest percentage change, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Councilman?
So I'm going to use Ward 8 because that's where I'm the councilman.
Yep.
So it went up 50, the average, the percent difference is 52%.
Correct.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So now with the homestead, the mayor has 45% taken off. So then it would be a plus 7%?
We don't deal with the homestead, we don't deal with any.
No, but I'm saying that I'm looking at the 45% is what the mayor's offering, right? That's what's on the table, the 1850 is 45%.
And the prior year, though, we had a 40% homestead. So we increased the homestead by 5%, and we also lowered the rate.
Right, but the average is 52% that they went
No,
up.
that's the value that went up.
The
Hold on,
value,
please,
right,
please.
but then the, what you call it, I'm trying to see, is it 7%, is it 7% an average?
No, it's so the average home value went up 52%. What we're saying is when we apply the tax rate, instead of taking 60% of your home value and taxing that, we're going to take 55% of your home value, and we're going to apply a lower rate to that. So it's not like as
not.
connected.
It's not.
I guess.
Okay, okay.
So actually, I think it would be helpful if, let's just, the average taxpayer gets its assessed value. And they freak out because and we're talking single-family homes right now. They get very upset because they see a drastic increase. And we're getting calls, we're all getting calls. So I think it would be helpful if we just walk through the calculation. Not you, because you came up with the process and the assessed value. The administration, could you just share with us, so you get a new assessed value and tell me, what do you do with that new assessed value? How do you calculate what is proposed by the mayor's budget? How do they do the math?
So we take the new proposal. Sorry, I wish I had some charts made up, but I haven't. But I'm happy to work with Gina to get.
So you take the assessed value.
Yeah. It's 300,000. We take, instead of in prior years, we would have taken 60% of that with the 40% homestead, right? So we would have taxed 60% of that value. This year, we're going to tax 55% of that home value. So let's look at.
So in easy math, let me help you. So you take the assessed value, you subtract the homestead.
Percentage.
The budget gives you a homestead percentage. This year, it's 45. Last year, it was 40%. It's a little higher. So assessed value, you subtract 45% of the value, you come up with a number.
55%.
And then, hold on, Councilman, please. You come up with a number, and then you multiply that number times whatever the rate in the budget proposal, and for single-family house, it's $18.50 per thousand. That's how you come up with your new tax amount.
Correct, yes.
Is that correct?
Yes,
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Now, in addition, I'm still the taxpayer. In addition to that, you would also subtract any exemption that you might have. Might it be a veteran's exemption, an elderly exemption, a vision exemption, all of those exemptions?
Correct.
That's correct? Okay. So that's how it's calculated.
Okay, yeah.
Is that helpful?
Mhm.
Okay.
But they don't have to call, because before they had to call if they were a veteran, they had to call if they're over 65.
So I believe those
Good
carry
question.
year to year. Janice, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, but if you are granted like an elderly exemption or a veteran's exemption, do you need to recertify those each year, or do they carry forward?
It will carry forward.
Okay, so, but again, say someone's, I don't know what the age is, 65?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so they were 62 when they did it, but now they're 65, they're gonna have to call in to get the thing.
Yes.
And if they don't know that, they're not gonna get the exemption, is that correct?
Correct.
So what proactive measures is the city taking to, I ask this every year, because what we do as council members is fight to get the exemptions reinstated. What do you do proactively to inform the residents about the existence of exemptions? What are we doing? When we send out a tax bill, do we say, hey, there's exemptions, you might qualify, here's what they are? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, all the exemptions are listed on the back of the tax bill.
Okay, clearly expressed, so that once they get the tax bill, they can apply. Is it too late at that point, or no? They have how many days to appeal their tax bill, to apply for an exemption?
Well,
I'm looking for you guys to fill in the gaps here, so I'm doing I'm providing the testimony. I'm looking for you to help me here. What is the process, please?
Well, we advertise on the back of the tax bills to inform the taxpayer exactly what exemptions are available to them. Fortunately, they are usually too late to apply when the tax bills go out for the personal exemptions, such as the elderly, the veteran, the blind, the widow of a veteran, and so on. You would have to apply by March 15th before the tax bills are issued. However, we do prorate for the homestead exemption.
So every year I come to this table and I ask the same question. Why can't we proactively let the residents know what their exemptions are? We know that there's a timeline. We know that after a certain date, the only way that they can get their exemptions is if the council takes a particular action. So why can't we be proactive about it?
I don't know what other measures we could take to be proactive. We don't know who is eligible for what personal exemption in advance without them coming forward and letting us know that they may qualify. We also have it on our webpage. Other than that, I don't know how else we could be proactive other than sending out mass mailings.
The biggest one is the elderly. The biggest one is the elderly. That's a huge, I mean,
What happens?
That is what.
Oops, sorry.
That's one that we're always chasing the tail on. The other one is veterans, and that seems like that could be an easy thing that we could go out to the veterans and ask who lives in Providence with their database against our database. We could do some proactive work on it. The only reason I raise it every year, and we don't seem to get any movement on that. So do you want to have, did you want to answer that? Have you thought about maybe reaching out or expanding your database to include age? Because I know that's been raised to me as one of the challenges. Why don't we have ages in our database?
The only way we would be able to collect age is if the owner came in and volunteered that information to us.
Okay. Councilman.
Okay, so we have Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, who are 70 years old, right? And they can't use a computer, they're illiterate. Not literate, but they just don't know how to get around the computer. Mr. Taylor passes away. Now, Mrs. Taylor is not on you don't know her age, but you know Mr. Taylor because he applied for it. How do you go about, how's Mrs. Taylor gonna get, she's not gonna get that, right? Because you're gonna write off as Mr. Taylor passing away. Is that correct?
That's correct. However, in a case like that, we do send out a new homestead recertification to see that Mrs. Taylor is still residing in the property, and in which case we would then ask her if she's eligible for the elderly exemption if it was previously under her late husband's name.
Okay, but again, why can't we send out something to people to say, hey, this is your, some people just get out of the service. They could be out of the service within the last 3 years and they don't know that they get an exemption. They're not gonna look at the back of the bill, I can tell you. They're gonna look at the front and they're gonna say, oh my God, look at this. Not knowing that they're gonna get a discount. So they're gonna call us, the council people, and then we're gonna say, yes, you do get a discount. They're gonna come down to see you. and they're gonna say, no, you don't get the discount because you didn't put in for it on time. So how can we, I think that's where the chairwoman was going, how do we alleviate that? Because 3 years before, I had the same calls of what do you get for, an exemption, and I look back at this process, and I can remember council president now, but chairman, and he wanted to do a progressive tax. And I shake my head and say, boy, we should have listened to him because we wouldn't be in this big gap. It would have been easier to make those gaps, I don't know if you remember that.
Level them off,
Level
yes,
them off, to be easier to
absolutely.
level. But that's too late, but.
Where
I just-
we're at now.
Yeah, we're in it now, but I just wanna know how, that we can notify these people to tell them, to save you calls too. In other words, it's gonna be people coming to you howling and screaming saying, why don't I get this discount?
Well, it's a difficult issue to solve because we don't have the information ahead of time to notify people. I wouldn't know.
But we just sent out, I received my, evaluation, right? From the company or wherever it came from, told me my evaluation. Why at that time couldn't you or somebody, the city, on the front page of that, here's your new evaluation, these are the exemptions. So now I can look at both when the bill, and then I can make that call.
Well, those notices were sent from the revaluation company and they have no purview over our personal exemptions.
Okay, we got a lot of action here on this.
Sorry.
No, that was a good question. Sarah?
I just wanted to say that I do hear those concerns, and I'm wondering if maybe Janice and I can meet and come up with some creative ways. Maybe we put flyers out at the senior centers, or we do some sort of marketing to get that information out ahead of time.
That's really what it comes down to. I appreciate your offer on that, and I'm sure that you would be absolutely willing to assist. Do you have a question?
I do not.
Okay. Councilman Vargas, will you?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Which percentage do your company use to get to these numbers, like?
So we use 95% of market value. State says 100%, we use 95%. There's, obviously in every sale, there's closing costs, there's all kinds of different, figures in every sale. So we try to bring every community in at 95%.
So let's say for example, my grandma's property is valued $150,000. You multiply 150 by 95%?
If it's valued at $150,000, that's 95% of market value.
And then she got a new value for 280? Where you got the difference, like how you?
So, no, so you're confusing two different animals there. If you're looking at a valuation of $150,000, that's 95% of market value. If you're looking at a valuation of $280,000, that's 95% of market value. We didn't take an old evaluation of $150,000 and multiply it by some number to get 280. That's not how it works.
Can you do a map then? Like, can you explain it better how to explain to my constituents how they got the value so high in their properties?
It's based on sales in any given revaluation period. So it's based on the sales we generally don't do wards, we generally do neighborhoods. That's okay. Your neighborhood is
I got
comprised
four
of.
neighborhoods in my area.
Right, so your ward is combined of a number of neighborhoods. It's all based on those sales from those neighborhoods into your ward. So, in general, your grandmother's house is similar to someone else's house that's sold, and that's what we base the value on.
For grandma, huh?
So just to expand, just to be clear here, so you're looking at last year's sales, you're taking 95% of the sale value.
Correct.
You're also looking at square footage, house style, land, the amount of land that they have, and that's how you come up with the rubric that you assign an assessed value to.
Yes.
So if someone were to appeal, one of the things they might be able to appeal on is if they have a ranch and you used a colonial.
Correct.
They've got a single floor property, they're being evaluated based on a two-story unit. They've got a 5,000 square foot lot versus a 10,000 square foot lot. So the appeals look at the differences, or, you know, a mistake perhaps in the evaluation or the definition of the property type, correct?
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. So let's talk about, I still want you to get through this presentation, which looks like, you know, that's gonna be a lot to ask for tonight. But if somebody wants to appeal, I heard you testify earlier that you've already begun the appeal process.
We're almost done with the appeal process.
So it's gone, it's, the timing is over. What happens if I've got constituents that, it happened in my ward, didn't get their mail because of a fault of the post office?
Right.
Do they still, can you preserve their right to appeal?
So this is just an informal appeal process through the revaluation phase of what we do. There still exists the formal appeal process to Janice and her staff, and that starts when your first tax payment is due, and you have 90 days going forward to file a formal appeal. So what we do is just on an informal basis. It's a short meeting down the hall, or it's a phone call to us where we take the information down, we verify it as best we can, and make any adjustments that are warranted. If you're still not happy, you have every right to appeal to the assessor's office.
Are you making changes?
Yes.
You are. What percentage of the folks that appeal are you making changes for?
We haven't finished that up yet.
Okay, about?
We haven't done data
You don't
entry,
know.
so
Okay.
I couldn't even give you a relative guess.
Okay. All right, so we've done single-family presentation.
Hold on.
Can I just ask one quick question? How
Councilwoman?
many residents have availed themselves of the consult?
It's about 1,200 so far, which is about 3%, and anything under 5% is low.
So my concern is, those letters came out and it said the deadline, I think, was May 6th. I mean, a lot of people were just caught by surprise, didn't even notice the date, you know, the end date for the informal consult. So I think that, you know, I think there was a lot of confusion, not enough time given. I've heard back from some of my constituents that said the process wasn't very good. You know, there's a lot of, you know, scheduling and issues and things like that. So I'm just wondering why such a short period of time was allowed for people to do this informal process.
Because the council needs a firm tax base so you can set a firm tax rate. So there has to be a deadline somewhere. And we could continue hearing informal appeals to Christmas, and you would never have a firm tax base. You need a firm tax base at some point in time so that you can have a definite tax rate.
So there is always an appeal period. That's not new. I guess to get to the meat of the issue, is your appeal period any different than what has been offered in the past? And we're going to ask Janice for testimony on that. Is the appeal period the same amount of time?
It is the same amount of time we've given in the past.
And what is that time? How many days from the date the letter is sent out to the date they have to present themselves? What is it? Do we know?
It's just shy of about 3 weeks, I believe, is what we did.
3 weeks
Right,
from
2.5.
the date of receipt or mail?
Mail.
Okay, so just throwing this out, and I think that, you know, Councilwoman Taylor, Anthony might have alluded to it. I know in my ward, the mail has been really slow, so you're almost cutting off a week's time. So that is a concern of the council for receipt in reasonable time to appeal. Yes.
So we do send everything first-class mail, and we do use the post office right here in Providence for all of our town's mailings. So it is delivered right here in Providence.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be much of a delay.
There is.
You know.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to raise that. Councilman Taylor, do you have
One
a
last question. I know you mentioned about the, he mentioned it, about the 90 days, like there's the informal, and then you have the regular 90-day appeal. Why can't we have a 90-day appeal for the, not appeal, whatever you want to use for the exemption, for the, if the person's over a certain age or if it's military, why can't they fall under that 90-day appeal? They'll call it something
by
else.
ordinance?
You would have to update your ordinance to allow for that.
Okay, we can look at that. Thank you. That's good. Okay, so have we finished the single-family topic? Yes? Okay, let's move on to the multifamily values and how that has moved. And again, I'd like testimony on the average and then the impact by ward. It is the highest real estate value increase, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let's talk about that.
So, like the single-family wards, wards 1 and 2 on the east side saw the lowest percentage increase. But once again, they started with the highest starting average values. So Ward 2, the last average value is $655,000. They went up 41% to $927,000, which is a substantial increase in value. But yet again, on a percentage basis, they're not as high as other wards in the city. To go to Councilman Taylor's point, Ward 8 is up substantially more than the east side on a percentage basis, but not on a dollar basis. The lower...
Someone coughed.
Oh.
Online.
It was the owl.
The four lower wards were between 202 and 211,000. Ward 8, Ward 10, Ward 11, and Ward 15. And they saw the most increase on a percentage basis in value. Once again, your lower priced properties are going to go up on a percentage more than your higher priced properties.
Okay. Let's talk condominiums.
We don't have a discussion, so, Madam Chair?
Excuse me, Councilman, do you have a question that you'd like to ask?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. How these, do you have a solution, how they going to, this station, how they going to survive on these high value that you put up? You will tell me again that you went based on 95% value. The question is, at the end of the day, the renters is the people who's going to pay the price. These high value properties are going to pass into the renters. And then we're going to, for next year, these people will be moving out of the neighborhood and going south. And then we have to be careful, because then we're going to be ending with an empty share or empty property. And some people might walk away from that. They will say, no, I'm not going to keep paying this house, I don't have enough money, and then that we won't have a problem. We have to look for a solution, how we can work it out and work with the value. I understand, because I cannot compare a house from 115 to a house on the east side. It's totally different, like, we comparing apples and oranges.
Right.
I got the orange, and they got the apple. And we have to figure out a number where we can meet, like not to shock too much the taxpayer, and everybody's happy.
So once again, our analysis is based on sales. If you want to start talking tax breaks for multifamily owners, you're back to homestead exemptions and things like that, whether they're owner occupied or non-owner occupied. That is not the purview of what we do. We just analyze sales. Homestead exemptions, that's up to you.
So what I want to know is what happened to multifamilies? They've seen the highest increase. Why are they so attractive? Why are the sales increased as they have across the city?
So your multis are your most affordable, well, condos may be your most affordable option, but as far as ownership goes, your multis become more affordable. My son couldn't afford a house for himself, so he bought himself a 3-family house.
What is the
Depending on
number? What's the number of multis in the entire city versus the number of single families in the entire city?
I don't have that in front of me, but I know that it's a closer number than I originally thought when we started the project. But I don't have that number. I could get that for you.
I'd like to know that.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
number of
happy to
single
share that
families versus
information,
multi.
Madam Chair.
Wonderful, thank you.
Single families count is about 14,600. And multifamilies is about 13,780. So just
Interesting.
about half.
Okay, I wouldn't have guessed that, but that is
Because 2
interesting.
and 3 family, Madam Chair? Multi-family, they call 2 and 3 family?
2 to 5.
2 or 5?
2 to 5. And anything above 5 is a commercial property. 6 units and over are apartment complexes.
Why not 2 to 4?
Yeah, that's,
2 to 5, technically 2 to 5 are where you can get a residential mortgage on from Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac.
Fannie and Freddie are 2 to 4, not 5.
2 to, that's true, it is 2 to 4, that's the form. State code, the O2s are 2 to 5.
How many 5-unit properties do we have? Janice? Citywide.
Sorry, I didn't have that number available, but I'll be happy to get it to you.
I'd like to know.
Sure.
Okay. What about condos, while we're on the point of numbers here? How many condos do we have citywide?
Just shy of 3,700, 3,698.
Okay. All right. I keep interrupting you, so let's talk multis. We're seeing kind of the same trend. The lowest percentage number, again, on the east side. Not necessarily the dollar value.
Right, but the highest increase in dollar value,
Yep.
the ones that were at 655 that are at 927, they went up $272,000.
Yeah. Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions on the valuation on multis? You good? Not that you're good, but, okay, let's move on to condos. What's happening with the condos citywide and by ward?
So condominiums, once again, your Ward 1, 2, and 3 on the east side are your highest value condos. Also, Ward 12, which is downtown?
Yeah.
Downtown. They saw substantial increases, but not quite as high as the multis. Once again, generally an affordable alternative to single families, but still with increasing values, not so much affordable. And you have Ward 6, 8, 9, 10, and 14 with less than 40 condominiums in each ward. So there's not a lot of sales activity in those wards just because of the sheer number of condos. They just aren't in those areas.
that's any
So-
percent, that one.
So what I'd be interested in seeing, I know we're talking averages, but these are people's pocketbooks. I'd be interested in seeing the actual number array, ward by ward, for all of the increases. Do we have that? Do we have that, Janice? The increases
Are you-
by property type, ward by ward. Do we have the actual numbers? We do?
Do you mean,
Okay, it's in the presentation. We keep interrupting these
She's
folks.
jumping ahead.
Okay, let's move ahead. What's next, folks?
The
We
next-
left out commercial, let's talk
Right.
then, okay?
Page 8 commercial it's not broken down by ward because there's not enough activity.
Yep,
So we just did a general overall trend from that we were asked to do apartments, combinations, commercial and industrial.
okay. My question, Councilwoman Anthony?
Sorry, so how did you, when you said not much activity, how did you come up with the percentage increase that you did?
I just mean as far as volume for the city goes,
Oh.
it didn't seem to make sense to break it down by ward,
I
but
see.
just to lump all the categories together.
Got it, sorry, okay.
Please continue. That's
And it's
fine.
not surprising to see that your apartments have gone up. Once again, they become an attractive investment for people, either in the city or out. And they've seen substantial increases in value. And it's not necessarily absentee landlords.
So, sales in general, so you used last year's sales.
Correct.
no treatment of depressed or foreclosure sales. Does that impact the sale values at all? Probably, I don't know how many foreclosures there were. Or distressed sales.
Foreclosures by their nature are not considered arm's length transaction. You do not have a willing seller. You have an unwilling seller. You do not have knowledge of the property.
So they don't impact the sale value?
Not until the number of foreclosures create the market. If there was a significant, and I mean significant number of foreclosures, that's the option to pick from than other non-foreclosure properties, then that would affect the value. There have not been an exceedingly great number of foreclosures because values have been increasing. People have been able to sell prior to foreclosure. Even short sales, there haven't been many short sales.
Do we know that number citywide of all these different property types?
No, not off.
I'd like to know distressed property sales by property type citywide. What the number, what the values were. Any other questions over
Real
here?
quick. So when you do, so I just refinance my house. So that's basically what you're doing.
Yes.
Basically looking around, because I mean, it came almost exact.
Oh, we got one right.
Which was good, because I was looking for it was a cash out, they were looking to get the money.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I want to get more than this, and it came in that way. But that's how when you talk about the neighborhood, they look at the neighborhood around and say, okay, the house is going for $325,000.
Right, for an appraisal for the bank, you're gonna get 3 comparable sales. For what we do, we look at sales of hundreds of properties and have to set the model for every ranch in the city. Set a dollar per square foot for every ranch and then account for differences on a house-by-house basis.
And they're also like a duplex or even single family, they're bidding, like if I ask 300,000, they're bidding up to 325, 350.
That's the same throughout the
And
entire
that's
state.
gonna show on your sale.
Yes,
And it's gonna be higher, but the people are bidding it up higher.
they paid for it what they paid for it.
Okay, no, I just I know the council was talking about how you got the things, and when I heard it, I'm thinking, like a refund.
I have the same issue. I have a niece that was looking for a house. They sold a house in Attleboro. They got outbid on 8 houses. They're in South County now, and they overbid on that house by a ridiculous amount of money. But they wanted it. They were in an apartment in West Greenwich, and they wanted to be out of the apartment, so they bid more than the asking price. That is very typical in this market. You have significant demand and short supply.
That's you just say, short supply.
Right.
But for next year, we have surplus supplies, nobody wants to buy nothing because interest went up, nobody has money.
You may.
Well, they gotta wait 3 years, and hopefully the market comes down. I mean, that's reality.
Well, nobody wants the market to come down because they don't want to lose money.
Well, the taxpayers want it to go down.
Right.
Okay,
Until they go to
let's
sell.
continue, folks. It's
Okay,
getting
thank
late
you.
here, and
But,
please continue with your present. Yes,
can I
Councilman?
have a question, madam?
Please.
Before you go forward? I see says apartment combination, commercial, industrial, combination. What is combination for you guys? What's the criteria? What is the wording for you? What is the combination?
So combo is a mixed-use property, and it could be a multiple of things. It could be a restaurant and apartments above, it could be a variety store and apartments, it could be
Liquor store.
liquor store and apartment. It's a mixed-use property, meaning residential and commercial.
Okay, and now the question goes to you. Do we have a different tax bracket for these mixed-use properties?
The commercial rate.
So it's commercial, right? So is no way to count this as a combination because we're getting, the constituent are getting tax and commercial base.
Right.
Basically, it's called a commercial and not a combination. The bank will see it as a combination, but you will get charged as a commercial.
Janice, can we have a clarification on that? I'm not quite sure the combination, mixed-use properties are taxed at a commercial rate.
We split the rate. So we'll apportion the commercial rate to the percentage that is commercial, considered commercial, and then we'll use residential rate on the percentage that's used for residential.
How can I,
Please.
thank you, Madam Chair. How are you explaining this to the taxpayers? Because my my friend has a commercial mixed-use property, and his taxes says commercial, 36.85 cents per thousand. Doesn't say anything mixed-use, nothing, it says commercial.
I would have to look at that property. If you want to share that information with me, I'll be happy to look into it.
We can put in a mixed-use property tax record, and we can see that next time, if you don't mind, Madam Chair.
We can look at that, Janice. Thank you. Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, let's continue on here because we're never going to get, you have a question?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Is it possible, I also was very interested in getting some sort of information on owner-occupied versus non-owner-occupied and the percentage increases there. I mean, is that possible to do that analysis? Because I think that would be also interesting for us.
Do you have the ability to do that?
No, we don't know if you live in the house or not. So if somebody has a homestead exemption, you could think that is a metric could use, but not everybody has a homestead exemption because they might use their legal address as Florida or New Hampshire or wherever.
Madam Auditor?
Councilman, are you looking for just residential? If I look at the code residential and I can break that down for you. So if we can talk later, if you just, I'll figure out exactly what you want, I can take care of that.
I appreciate it, thank you.
And can I do one other comment?
Please.
On one of my reports, I have approximately 103.5 units. Does that sound about right, Janice, or you haven't even broken them out that way?
Thank you.
You are correct.
It sounds about right.
Okay.
Yeah, that does sound.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That burning question I had.
Thank you, Gina.
Okay, please continue.
So
We're not interrupting you, honest, till you get to the end at this point.
Well,
Please continue.
at this point is the raw data that we use, that I put together the charts for. So pages 9 through 23 are your ward by ward of each class of property, each class of taxable property. So go back to your question, Madam Chair. Land use code 02 is 2 to 5 family by state code.
Okay.
And we see the ward up in the left-hand corner, okay.
So there's a ward on the upper left-hand corner, and then in each ward you break down the property types, the counts, the value, the previous value, the current value, the difference. Thank you. Okay, so that's good information. And then the last piece of your presentation is relative to sales history, which I think we talked about, which would be good to go over.
Yeah. Yes, the last piece is the sales history. Once again, it's 25 years worth of data culled out of the local multiple listing service. And there was a discussion back and forth on whether to use the colors or not. I just generally like to use the colors as the greens are generally your 3 or 5 year highest values, and your reds are generally your 3 or 5, depending on how many I picked, years of lowest values. You would expect to see your lowest values in your oldest properties, 1998 through 2000, and then you peaked in general in 2005 and 6. Drop back down, now you're back up. These are median values, not average. These are median values from the MLS, which is what most of the realtors like to quote. You'll see the stories in the paper about the median value. And so the median value for the city for single family in general is $300,000 on single family properties.
Okay. Madam Auditor.
Just a general question. Are you seeing these trends in other municipalities throughout the state, country, region? Is it just
Yes.
the same large percentages, 46%, 57%?
Central Falls is up 65%.
So we completed the revaluation in East Providence. They're one of the communities that elected to push off the reval once we were done with it. But their single-family residents were up 40% on average, obviously.
Okay.
So they have pushed it off. I believe the final legislation has been approved there, but they're up 40%. Some more of the rural communities that we've completed this year. Burrville, North Smithfield, and Situate were all up 22, 24% on average. West Warwick was up 30% on average. Jamestown is around 30% on average, obviously. So it seems like as you get further out from the city, more rural properties, obviously the percentage is a little lower there.
And they're also larger value, right? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, do you have a question, Councilman
I'm so
Anthony?
sorry. I'm glad you brought that up. I guess it would be a question for our tax assessor or the chief. I mean, there was the article about some municipalities, pushing off their evaluations, basically so that they are protecting their taxpayers from suffering the tax consequences of an overinflated housing market that some people, the economists, are projecting will cool off by the end of the year. Did we ever contemplate doing that in Providence? Chief, you're muted.
Madam Council and members of the committee, we did contemplate that, but I do believe while that information is now developing in the current year, we are not seeing any significant or precipitous drop in values. In fact, I'm going to be further convinced that those values are going to sustain themselves. And to the credit of our assessor and her staff, they did the internal review of the preliminary reval numbers, and there was no evidence that would convince them that values would drop to a level that would be supportive of postponing the reval another year. I think we would be doing disservice to the taxpayers, believe that or not, including the city, by delaying the implementation of the reval. And I would bet that there are other communities who saw that in the same vein. The biggest complaint that we heard from other communities was the commercial values, in some instances, had risen to a point where the commercial owners were not going to be able to sustain the taxes because they couldn't rent those properties because of vacancies, or particularly the area of hotels. We have not seen a sustained value reduction in residential properties. Not in my opinion. Madam Assessor, would you have an opinion on that?
I agree with you, Chief. I haven't seen a significant drop off in sales for this current 2022 year. I'm not saying it's climbing like it had in 2021, but I'm still seeing an increase. Even in the first quarter, sales of single family properties, they were already up about 3%. Now that was just the first quarter. I don't suspect that we're going to see such a dramatic decrease in the next 6 months that it's going to have a tremendous effect on the bottom line value.
Okay, and then my other question is, I mean, have we ever thought of using a different methodology rather than using just the sales prices for the prior year? Was there a consideration to use like a multi-year moving average for valuations? So an abnormally high year like this year would not move the needle so dramatically. I mean, have we thought about using other methodologies?
Denise?
Well, we have to use the methodology allowed by law, and that is to study do an analysis of the current market.
So that's law. I asked that earlier. So that's state law, you're saying?
Correct.
Or is it our ordinance?
No, it's state law.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
If you can recall the exercise, I think Chief Taylor spoke about this committee, the chairman, current council president, talked about a different metric. We had to go up to the state to lobby for it. It was rejected.
Yep.
That was an effort to level the pain in a year like this. So he anticipated that, and we didn't get to where we hoped to go. Councilman Taylor just pointed out to me the large numbers of residential vacant property in each ward. Shocking to me that there's that much vacant residential property.
So,
There's also vacant land and vacant commercial properties. So two questions here. Why is it so high? It's shocking to me. And then how is the vacant land taxed? The vacant properties taxed? The
So-
same?
so it's not atypical for a homeowner to own 2 lots of record. They own 2 3,200 square foot lots, 2 5,000 square foot lots, depending on the zone. One of those has to be assigned an 01 code for a single family, and the other one is assigned a 13 code for a vacant lot. It's not necessarily a buildable lot, depends on the placement of the house on the lot. The house could straddle the lot line, the house could be entirely on one lot, and the other lot is free to be developed, which is quite a few of the calls we get during a revaluation. People will tell us that, you said we have a buildable lot. Well, we don't say that. It's, your lot conforms to zoning, and you can either build a house or not.
So the residential vacant category is land?
Land.
Not houses.
13, no, it's not houses.
Oh, okay.
We don't know vacant houses.
Okay. I was panicked because I was looking, saying, I don't know if that many.
No.
There's 3,200 of them. I'm like,
No.
Okay.
State code 13 is for vacant land.
And 14 is.
Was commercial.
So, first of all, thank you. Does anyone have any more questions for the statistical analysis? I know it was a painful presentation that we had to, do you have more questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, the last one.
Relative to the analysis, the statistical analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
You mentioned the square feet several times. You value on square feet. How much the square feet on your mind?
How much?
How much what? I'm sorry.
What's the square feet cost? Because you always mentioned is 2,500 square feet. We base on the square feet.
2
Why?
seconds and I'm done.
What was the value?
2 minutes?
So every house style, you develop a different square foot price. I don't know each style off the top of my head. So, for example, 2021, there was 2,000 sales, there was 200 colonial sales. We developed a square foot price for colonial. We developed a square foot price for ranch. We developed a square foot price for cape. Every style gets a different square foot price. It's not $50 a square foot across the city. It's every style of home develops a different square foot price.
I let it put it more easy. What about commercial?
Same thing with commercial. Every style, meaning if it's a garage, if it's a restaurant, if it's the hospital, if it's taxable, or I'm trying to draw a blank here, if it's a retail store, every single one of those develops a different square foot price. Same
We
thing.
don't know the price.
I don't know it off the top of my head. No, sir.
There's not one price. There's many different prices for all different categories, based on the sales analysis. If something sells for, $100,000 and it's 1,000 square feet, that's $100 a square foot. Likewise, if it sells for 200,000 and it's 1,000 square feet, that's $200 a square foot for the building portion of the assessment.
My grandma's not selling the house.
Your grandma doesn't have to sell her house.
But it's based on it's charged on based on the set.
Well, it's based on the sales in the neighborhoods within your ward.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, it's getting late here, but I thank you very much for your presentation. Now my question is is actually to the administration. The budget references residential tax rate 1850, commercial tax rate 3385, tangible 55.55 with properties assessed under $10,000, no tax. How did you come up with that? What modeling was done? I'm very interested in that. Could someone make a presentation quickly? We'll probably address it later on, but I don't have too much time, but as quickly as you can you talk about the modeling that you did to get to these amounts? Who wants to take it?
So I can take it. So we are, under state law, limited to the total levy growth of 4%. And then we need to figure out, there's also constraints about tax rates. So you have your real estate tax rate. Your commercial tax rate cannot be more than twice your residential. And your tangible tax can't be more than 3 times your residential. So we need to be able to stay within those ratios. The 45% homestead exemption was determined, we want to try to help homeowners that live in the city. We were trying to mitigate the tax increases on those properties of people who live and own homes in the city and are residents of the city. I don't know if Chief Mancini has anything further.
Any further explanation, Chief? Thank you very much.
Well, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ms. Silveria has explained it properly. We're governed by 44-5 of the various subsections of that state general law on how a municipality must proceed in terms of the increase in its levy can be no greater than a 4% increase. The taxation must be associated with the type of taxation by residential, commercial, tangible, and the various components of size over the other. I will say this, Madam Chair, that in every reval, the most prudent method is what's known as tax equalization. While values have risen in every municipality, what a municipal finance office or assessor would do is the prudent thing. You bring the rate as close as you can down to arrive at the prior year's levy. That only gets you to tax equalization. But that's not always practical because then there is the ordinary growth of the budget, and that requires that revenue that's governed by the cap. That exercise is used in every municipality in the state. And therefore, we use the tenets of that knowledge to say, what tax rate could we drop from 2457 down to, and what exemption could we offer increase that would approximate as close as we could to the tax bill that was previously issued in the prior year. By my rudimentary mathematics, generally speaking, property that incurred an increase of somewhere less than 50% probably will have a tax bill with no significant impact change. I've tested that on a number of properties throughout the city, properties that I know personally, that I know the value of those properties, and I can say that with confidence, most properties that sustain an increase as an owner-occupied property with an owner-occupied exemption of somewhere below 50%, that could be 40, 45, probably will see, if this is enacted with the new tax rate of $18.50 and the exemption of 45%, notwithstanding any other exemption, would probably see a close to or approximate same tax bill.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We may have some follow-up questions for you on how you arrived at that those tax rates as we move through the budget process. I thank you all for your testimony. I thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you, committee members, council members, for your questions tonight. I think we accomplished a lot. We meet again, when do we meet again? Thursday? Thursday, we're here again. Okay. Without anything else on our agenda this evening, may I have a motion? We should continue these items. Let's continue items 1 through 5. Motion to continue by Chief Taylor, seconded by Councilman Anthony. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. And how about, you want to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn made by Chief Taylor, seconded by Councilwoman Anthony. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.